Go. All right, here we go. Hey, everybody. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to this video. If you're watching on YouTube, awesome. Subscribe, whatever you want to do. Watching on IGTV, hey, thanks for watching. Follow us if you're not. I'm hanging out with my friend Justin Hamilton from Generation Church, and just going to have a candid conversation about what's going on in our world today. My heart in all of this is I want to more than ever let the Black community know the church is listening, and if we're not, we're wrong. I will be honest. I'm not the person that's gonna say that if you're not like the most outspoken, loud person in the world right now, then you're a perpetuator of the problem. I'm not gonna say that, but I will say now more than ever, the church cannot remain silent about what's going on and allow the Black community to be heard. So anyway, I'm excited, and I want to talk about a couple things here. But Justin, really quick, let everybody know a little bit who you are and what you do.
Cool. Married to my wife for going on 9 years in August. We have 2 girls, age 7 and 1 going on 21. Super attitude. And then we have a girl dad. That's right. Yeah. Shout out my dad, Coach
Right.
Brian. Yeah. And then our 8-year-old son, Maximus, who's also a bulldog. But
I love that.
I love pastoring in Generation. And in the Arizona area, we moved out here about 4 years ago. So we love it in the summertime. But I do love what I do. I get to be one of the youth pastors at Generation Church in Mesa AZ. And it's a privilege to be here today.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Well, I'll just jump right in. One of the main questions I want to ask is, I was texting you the other day and asking, has it affected you in the church world? And just full disclosure for everybody watching this, we were recording earlier and the recording failed. So let me kind of recap the question and then we'll go from there. I asked beforehand, is racism a thing? My son wants in. Children, I swear. Does racism exist in the church? And some of the things we talked about was exposing students as youth pastors. We say we want to expose them to the hood and mission trips and all those sorts of things. One of the things you messaged me about was that really struck me was when you preached on a Sunday morning and told your story, and somebody discounted what you had to say due to your story involved your race. And I will say that made me tear up a little bit because no one has ever – my story is riddled with drug abuse and alcoholism, and nobody has ever said, all you do is make it about being white. No one has ever discounted what God has done in my life. So anyway, I don't know if I did a great job rephrasing what we just said, but kind of talking me through a couple of those things we talked about when it comes to race in the church that you've experienced.
Yeah. So I think one of the first times that I experienced an uncomfortable moment due to my ethnicity was I was at a youth pastors conference right when I started getting in youth ministry, and it was this mega church pastor, real well known. And he made the statement that he was talking to his daughter. He was using some type of analogy. He said, he was talking to his daughter, and he said, "You can't be a gangster. You're a white girl." And my immediate thought was, what's the opposite of a white girl? Maybe a black boy. So if she was a black boy, she could be a gangster. If she was a black girl, she could be a gangster. Because she's a white girl, she can't. And the statement was made, and I was really one of maybe 3 or 4 Black people in the room out of like 150 plus, youth pastors. And so it made me realize that I'm sure he would have made that joke or that analogy if he was in a room where the majority of people were African American, because it would have been inappropriate, it would have been insensitive. But I think that he felt comfortable because he didn't see many people that look like him, or maybe he comes from a church where he doesn't have many African Americans, so he doesn't have to think through that process of the things that he says and how they can affect people. So that was one thing. And then kind of what you said, piggybacking on what you said earlier, I think one of the biggest things that bothers me is when I have pastor friends that will say, yeah, we always make sure we always take our kids to, you know, Compton or somewhere where in the real hood where they can really on a mission trip so they can really experience and understand what's going on. And I think that what that does is that dehumanizes the people that live there on a regular basis, and it turns them into like a zoo mission trip experience where let my suburban white kids come see how bad it is where you live so they can appreciate where they live more and then where you live, or let them come, you know, help out or do something to make them feel better about themselves and then go back to their safe space. And I think that's such dangerous thinking, because what you're doing is you're teaching people that minorities or people of lower socioeconomical backgrounds, they need to be saved and done ministry to rather than with. Because what you're not doing is you're not creating opportunities for long-standing relationships and for people to do life with people and do it that way. It's more of like an experiment. That's how it feels for the people that you're coming to.
Can I just ask further on that one? So for someone who would say, well, isn't that kind of the point of a foreign missions trip anyway? Because oftentimes, anytime I've been on a mission trip with students, they've always come back seeing the poverty and all these things really, and let's get real, most of the time, a missions trip is to like a place like El Salvador, where it's predominantly not white, right? So what would be the difference between the viewpoint, or maybe even the verbiage we use? What would make the difference there?
That's a good question. I think for one, when Jesus says go into all nations, right, in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then the ends of the earth, those were all places that they could have constant presence and relationship with those people, right? Like Jesus himself went through Samaria, took time, sat down, and then started a chain reaction that changed the whole place. And we don't see him. And, you know, Paul, he would go all over the place. There's a difference between going places to share, bring hope, encourage, deposit, versus I just want to kind of see what it's like, and I want to feel better about myself that I don't have to go through this. When in actuality, I don't think you should ever look at something that's local as a mission. Let me rephrase that. I do believe in local mission trips as far as getting outside of your realm, like whether you were to go to an environment that you're not going to live in, that you know that, and you have a mission mind to do that. I respect that. I think that's great. That's awesome. I think the problem is when we train predominantly white suburban youth, that when you go to these African-American communities, this isn't a mission. This isn't some place that you got to pay a lot of money to and you can never get back to. This is your backyard. These are places that you should actually be thinking, how can I have relationship with these people that's elongated and that's intentional and that isn't regulated to a once a year experience? Or, you know what I mean? Like, you got to think about the fact that you can get to 5 minutes no matter where you live in the valley, right? So for me to think that me going to hang out or me going to in a Black community without asking how can I have relationship with the people continually in this community, I think that's a problem. And I think it's a problem when we look at it as they're less off than we are. Like, there's church all over the Black community. I think that what needs to be happening is how can we build relationships with those churches so that we can learn from each other and we can have long-lasting relationships in community with each other, instead of we'll go there to expose our students to something that's not normal in their, you know what I'm saying?
That's really good.
Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it does. It's the idea of we want to disciple students to see everyone on the same playing field. And inadvertently, when we communicate that, we're inadvertently saying the minorities aren't on the same plane unless they live in our social economic status. Unless they live in the suburbs, they're the same. Because you're right, I'm not going on a missions trip down the street in my own suburb necessarily. You know what I mean? Granted, it's all a mission field, but we're not communicating, because we would still say, hey, your school is your mission field, but we're not saying people the people are less than. So yeah, that's super insightful. Another question. Go ahead.
Well, I think think about if the tables places we go to third world countries. Typically, mission trips are to third world countries because the fact of the matter is they do live, you know what I mean, above garbage heaps, and they don't have access to the gospel consistently. Or we're trying to we're if I don't bring this, if I don't come out here and do this, who will, right? But it's not feasible most of the time, unless we're long-term missionaries, for me to I mean, well, depending on what they have access to, but between Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, like there are more ways to keep longer lasting relationships. But I think about the fact that, like, I'll just give a perfect example. I went on a mission trip. I coached at a Christian school out here in the Valley, and they would do mission trips every year. And so one year I went on the mission trip with them, and they went to this place in Utah, Alabama. You've never heard of it. You've never been there. Trust me, it's crazy, but you should. It's interesting, and it literally feels like you're taking a trip in a time machine. Like, it's the South. Churches are segregated. The red lines are very clear as far as where the Black community lives, the white community lives. Like, it's insane.
This is 2020, or like this is modern?
2019, 2018, 2019.
No way.
Dead serious, bro. So we go there, and I love the concept of it. We went there, it was a mission trip, but we were doing basketball clinics. So we were teaching the fundamentals of basketball. I was with the basketball team, the boys and the girls basketball teams. We go to this place, and the philosophy was great. We're doing these basketball clinics. Here's what hurts me. You got to meet all these people. You have people that are being put in prostitution in middle school by their own communities. The pimps are in their communities. It's crazy, the depravity that they're living in. It's insane. We do this mission trip where we do basketball clinics, which I think is an awesome access point, right? I wish churches would be more intentional about finding things that actually benefit that are attractive to the people, not just to hold church services, but practical things that are fun for students. So we hold these basketball clinics. It was awesome. And then the last day we shared the gospel, and two things happened. And I'm kind of diverting a little bit from your original question, but I hope this sheds light, and then you can get us back on track. The kids were the children, the students I came with, they were exposed to things they'd never seen. Some of them had never, there's like 3 or 4 Black people at their entire school. You know what I mean? Like, so this is a very different cultural experience for them, which I think is great. I think it's so great to be exposed to more. But here's the problem. We do the last day, we do a presentation of the gospel, and I'm standing right there. I'm the only Black guy from Arizona that's at this trip, by the way, right? We do a presentation of the gospel. One of the adult chaperones, coaches, he presents it. Mind you, I'm a youth pastor, right? So I think it would make a little more sense if the youth pastor communicated to students, but that's a different issue. He communicates the gospel. It was awesome. And then we do a prayer of salvation, and then literally we leave. We go back to Scottsdale, Arizona. Here's the problem with that. One, the following year, those students go to a different mission trip at a different place. So what happens is, for both sides, is this. For the Black kids, they saw these white people that came in, cleaned up their gym, which is great. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's great to do acts of service. Those things are good things. The problem is these white people, this white community comes in, paints their gym, teaches them basketball, leaves, never comes back. We never directed them to a local church to get plugged into. There was no follow-up steps. It was just, hey, we're going to come here because we want to expose our suburban kids to things that are happening around the world, which in itself is not inherently evil. But what's the point? Because it's like, there's no continue doing life with these students. There was no, it's not like we're coming to the same spot every year and we're going to invest in building up lives however way we can through the truth of the gospel, through community, through relationships. There's no long-term plan. It's just, let's try that out and let's try that out. And I don't think that's healthy for the psyche of, one, the students who get in there because they never see stability, and two, the white kids who go on those trips because it's like, oh yeah, I checked that off my bucket list, but I never actually have to change my life or make an effort to actually build consistent. I'm never taught to have intentional relationships with people who are not like me. Group. That's just a mission trip we do.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Wow.
So when
Yeah.
we start looking at people as mission trips, as opposed to human beings who just maybe aren't exposed to you or don't have the same privileges that you have based on where they were born, I believe that's the problem.
Yeah. Wow. That's really good. It's really insightful. Another thing I want to ask though is before the video cut off the first time, you talked about how someone said something about at a conference like, "Hey, this guy goes to black church. They're lit," or something like that.
Yeah.
I want to say something. Just full disclosure. Here's something. I had a African American pastor evangelist. Pretty well known. If I said his name, like, speak at one of our events, our big event, and I actually said to him on the phone, and this was 2016 maybe. I said to him on the phone, I want you to go hard. I know, like, I want you to bring it. You know what I mean? In my eyes, I meant nothing, right? So, but there's a part of the conversation that I keep hearing is, it's where I want to know where the line is, because here's the deal. I don't want to be like, hey, we want a black person to come to my event because they can perform and they're entertaining. You know what I mean? Rather than I'll be honest. Like when I preach at Hispanic church, I look forward to speaking at an Hispanic church because one, I get to speak with a translator and that's a lot of fun. But two, I look forward to it because they go hard. Like in worship, they'll worship for 4 hours and like they'll just go crazy, and I love it. So, and as you can see, I'm getting passionate talking about it. But like, so where is the boundary between admiring, or maybe what's the verbiage of clear communication between admiring the culture versus pandering and entertain? Because I never, and I think this might be helpful for youth pastors as well. Like, I never want to come across condescending and pandering. I want to come across as like, no, I appreciate the culture and I appreciate the uniqueness that you bring to the table. So what advice would you give there?
I think it's twofold. I think for one, that's the beauty and the power of relationships. Like, because say dang near anything to me and I wouldn't be offended because I know your heart. We have a relationship. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I think that the more you build relationships with people, the more you know what I mean? Like you'll get to, like, outside of the race thing, like I don't know. Like I mean, I was making fun of not making fun. I was pointing out your toys behind you, and I was like, cool Transformers collection. You're like, actually it's Power Rangers. You know what I mean? So now that I know you, I'll know, like, I would never say like Christian's obsessed with Transformers when you clearly told me it's Power Rangers. Does that make sense? Because we have that, we've communicated, we have that relationship. So I say that because I don't think it's a one size fits all thing. I think that based on people's relationship with you, there's things that they might not even be aware of, and that they won't hold on to any offense, or they won't even notice it. But also, if you do want to err on the side of wisdom, which is I think what we're really trying to, I made that as the clause first. But when it comes to just using wisdom, I think it's important to identify what are my habits, like what are my I don't want to say rhythms, but what's the habit I have here? For example, is it rare that my students hear from a minority speaker? Is it like a special event? Or if I'm only looking for a certain, like, oh, we need this to be hype, let's look for the black guy or the Hispanic girl, or you know what I'm saying? Like if you find yourself only looking for certain people in spot moments and highlight moments, then there's an issue. You need to check your circle. You need to notice that, like, whoa, why aren't they continuously hearing from multi-ethnic voices or multiple different people and personalities? Because that's the type of youth group I want. So you have what you are, you know what I mean? You track what you are. So it would be insane of me to, assume that I'm going to just develop this super multi-ethnic youth group if every time those multi-ethnic students come, they don't see anybody on the stage that looks like them, right? So I think that's the first thing. Like if it's rare that I'm getting a person of different color to communicate, then that's the problem. The second thing is, though, there is a reality of like, I don't think it's wrong to identify the fact that like if you go in certain circles, it's gonna be high. You know what I mean? You're gonna get different results. If you go to certain environments, you're gonna get different things, you know? Like regardless of what ethnicity is, if you go to a Catholic church on a Sunday for mass, it's not hyped.
Which I've been to mass one time and I oddly enjoyed it. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I like classical music. I aspire to that. But my point, though, to be direct with your question, I don't have a lot of time to just throw out random things, but I think that that it comes down to what is my motive for this? You know what I mean? Like, what is my motive, and what is my what is my habits? Because I can tell you, we intentionally at Generation for the youth group, we're intentionally putting a variety of voices at our students. We intentionally do a variety of different styles of music through worship. Why? Because I want multiple students to feel connected to something that's familiar to them, that resonates to their spirit, resonates to who they are, and I want them to feel safe and comfortable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when it comes to, man, I want something really hype, I need to get a black guy that's going to bring it. Okay, we'll have them bring it even when you don't need it, something hype. You know what I mean? Like don't let it just be a camp or a conference thing. Like it should be, your students should be so used to that. And there's white guys that bring it. You know what I mean? There's so many people, but I do think that when we in our mind, I think what you said is so good. It's when in my mind, I've already projected the type of person I need to get the type of energy. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's huge.
So I look at it like that. If I'm already in my mind classifying the type of ethnicity I need to get the type of energy I want, that's the problem. And if I'm not able to, especially as youth pastors, you can't control. I agree with you. I love going to different type of churches because you're going to get different vibes. I love preaching at black churches because I'm going to get that. A lot of them, I'm going to get that gospel music. I'm going to get a B3. I'm going to get that organ. It's going to be. I think that's beautiful that people can appreciate and long to be in environments that don't reflect who they look like, but reflect who they appreciate and who they love. I think that's great. Okay, it's great that you love preaching at Hispanic churches. And they're responding and stuff. You don't even know what they're saying, but you know that they're with you. I think that's
might be cursing me, bro.
Yeah, but that's beautiful, man. I think, but as pastors and leaders, our job is, how can I expose my students to a variety of things on a consistent basis to where that's normal for them? You know what I mean? Like it's normal and it doesn't feel, oh, we're getting a black speaker. Like, why is that rare? You know, I think that's the problem.
That's really
good. It shouldn't be rarity. It should be a normality.
Yeah, one of my I wouldn't say goals, but like definitely one of the things I wanted for my youth ministry was I wanted a Celebration Church in Florida. I was at a conference, at ARC conference once, where their lead pastor spoke, and he said something that was so profound to me. He's like, man, we want every single color on our stage, and here's why. Because we want our church to look like heaven, and heaven will be every race, every tribe, every tongue. So our ministries need to reflect heaven. And I thought that was so profound.
I got a different way of saying it. I think our churches should look like Walmart.
Yes.
People might not, some heaven's far away. Like Walmart is around the corner. If your church look like your local Walmart, you're failing.
Dude, that's gonna be the YouTube thumb. That's gonna be the clickbait. I want my church to look like Walmart. That's so good. Dude, can I make that a sermon? Dude. Dude, that's so freaking good. I love that so much. Well, I actually have quite a few more questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to ask you instead just one last one that's probably the most pertinent. I have a lot more to ask. Okay, we'll ask two more. Two more. One's from as we're talking about exposing students to all kinds of multinational, multi-ethnic, I want to ask, because there are parts of Arizona, or not just America, that are predominantly white. Like I grew up in Sand Springs, Oklahoma. Yeah. I can tell you from high school, I can tell you for about 5 or 6 black kids that I remember. Yeah. And so there are students that are going to be growing up in these, like, I think about Gilbert, predominantly white.
Yeah.
What would your advice be then? Because I don't want this to be perpetuated to where it's white kids, based off where they live, they feel guilty for not knowing a black person.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to that?
I say there should never be shame on where you live, things you can't control, right? So the same way, like, I don't want my kids in Scottsdale or Gilbert to feel like, well, it's not my fault. I was born here. Like, I can't, like, there's no shame in that.
Thank you.
I think the healthy thing about this generation is there's no excuse not to be exposed to more, though. You have YouTube, you have Zoom, you know what I mean? Like, there's all these youth pastor networks. Like, the conversation we're having right now can still be had in Boondock, Kentucky, if the youth pastor would just think, you know what, there's some crazy stuff happening and that our students aren't even aware of. Let me ask my local DYD if he can connect me with the minority speaker who can zoom into my students and speak to that issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like, I think we're beyond the stage of having excuses for our ignorance.
Wow.
I believe in our generation, ignorance is a choice, not a flaw, or not even flaw. You get what I'm saying, though? It's not a necessity. Ignorance isn't a necessity, it's a choice. Because anything I want to learn, I can Google, I can YouTube, I can, like, there, and that's the same thing goes when it comes to ministry and diversity. If I want my youth ministry to be more diverse, even if I can't change the seats that are in the room, I can change the voices that are on the microphone. I can bring in a Hispanic pastor to shed light. I can bring in, how about this? We're all our Native American youth pastors that have, you know what I mean? Like, that are grinding it out in on reservations and things like that. Like, we can Zoom them in, we can Instagram live them in. Like, there's really, I believe we're that generation when Jesus says, go out into all nations. Like, we're that all nations generation. Shout out Generation Church. But do you get what I'm saying? Like, I feel like anything you want, it's
you
this
are
close.
giving me so much clickbait right now.
It's this close.
So good. Ignorance is not a necessity. That is freaking good, dude. Oh, so okay. Last thing, then I'll let you get on with your day. I don't know if you saw my little guy. I had to mute myself because he came in here screaming, and my wife came and got him. So anyway, my kids are fussing as well. So last thing is this. Moving forward, I believe this: the church should be the friendliest, most openest place in town. I believe that what students aren't going to get at school, hopefully they'll get at the church. And vice versa. Hopefully what they are getting at school, sometimes they won't get it at church. But unfortunately, that is the case a lot of times. So I had somebody tell me that a prominent African-American influencer on Instagram, her biggest trolls right now are middle school age white boys who are just trolling her with hardcore racist stuff. And I think that boils down to education and whatnot. But for youth pastors and youth groups, what would your advice be? What would you say? How do I squelch racism on its face in the local church, local youth ministry context? Like, what would you tell a student or a youth pastor?
I'm going to tell you what I would tell them. Give me one moment. Matthew 6:23. It says, is it 23 or is it the verse before? I love this. It says, 22, Matthew 6:22. That's the scripture that comes to mind. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And I think the problem with that has been happening. I'll speak in faith, and I'll speak into what's happening right now. I think there is a revival and an awakening of the church and of this generation, specifically Gen Z. Like, Gen Z is woke. All right. and they see things that are happening. I went to a peaceful protest a couple days ago that was organized and led by a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 16-year-old. Three girls at the high school set up a protest that hundreds of people came to in a day. They did it in a day. They thought of it, and then they started posting the next day, and hundreds of people showed up. That's awesome. What's happening in outside of the church is what needs to happen inside the church. You have to shine light on the darkness.
Come on.
There are people in the church that they think things are better than they are. They think that because their reality, their experience is their reality, and they're not cognizant of the experiences of the person next to you who's 5 shades darker than them, that has a totally different reality because of their real experiences. I believe that if you want to change your youth ministry, you have to shine light onto the things that are actually happening in the world to minorities. And so I think as more pastors have hard talks with their students, as more, and here's the thing, it's not always easy. I'm a black man and I pastor a predominantly white church. Like, it's multi-ethnic, but I'm the minority in my church. And it's awesome. But at the same time, when I'm having talks about racism, my thought is, do these kids even care? Because it doesn't affect them directly.
Yeah.
So that's, and if I know that if I'm feeling that as a black person who's talking about something I'm going through that I want to bring light and empathy to, I know that has to be the same thing for some of my white brothers who are like, well, how do I communicate this to my kids in Wisconsin when it's not like we have a lot of black kids that we can point to that they can relate? You know what I'm saying? So it is, I'm not saying it's not difficult, but it's the only way. If you don't shed light on the darkness that's happening, our kids will grow up dark thinking that they're seeing the light.
That's so good.
They will grow up in darkness thinking they're seeing the light.
So I love that with Gen Z, man. Like, any Youth Alive leaders that are watching this, think about what you could do on your campus next year, shining the light of Jesus in exposing racism and squelching it right in its face. I would say one of the things we would always say as in our youth ministry, we would say when you hear a negative word or you hear something negative, make it awkward. We want to make it awkward to be negative here. Like, really? You think that? Like, that's dumb. Or like, you know what I'm saying? And so like that was one of our phrases. And so I would say, like, youth pastors watching this, or especially students watching this, because let's get real. Students watching this, other students are probably going to be more real with you than they'll be with their youth pastor. So if you hear something racist, make it awkward. Like, make them feel so weird for even this. Like, I'm not racist. I just made a joke. Like, no, we want to eradicate that culture. We want to get rid of that entirely. Like, so I think that's good, man. Like, students, man, when you hear something, you just got to freaking drop it right away. Like, that has no place in this youth ministry. Okay. How about this? What would you say to a youth pastor who's nervous to say something from the stage?
You have what you allow. So if you want to be responsible for keeping a generation perpetuating the cycle of oppression, racism, ignorance, it's because you allow it. If you have a church if you have a youth group, because you can only control your youth ministry. If you have a youth ministry that is insensitive, ignorant, or just unempathetic, some people really don't care. They're like, well, that sucks, but you know what I mean? And I said this recently to my students, you will not pray passionately about people that you don't have compassion for.
Ooh.
And so I think that until us as youth pastors bring an awareness to our students and help them to start feeling more compassionate about people who don't look like them, it's the same thing we do with everything else. Like, sex is wrong. Why? It feels good. I don't feel bad about it. No. It hurts the heart of God. And what we're trying to communicate to our students is that when you hurt the heart of God, if you love someone, if you're hurting someone you love, that's not, do you really love them? Like, that's not what you should do. And that's how we teach and disciple through sin issues. Racism is another sin issue. So if it doesn't hurt you, ask yourself why. And pastors, it's on you. You have what you allow. And so this will stop, specifically in the church, and when youth pastors raise up a generation that won't tolerate it anymore.
That's so good. So good. So we'll end on that. Justin, thanks so much. My approach is to never be right, but to be reasonable. I think if we approach anything with going in, I'm going to try to be right, we've lost. And so I want to learn what I need to learn. And I want to be, when it comes to this idea, like, I never experienced this, so it's not real. That's pride.
Yeah.
I want to remove pride and say, other people watching who feel like I've never experienced this, be humble and move past what you think to understand somebody else. Jesus left ultimate privilege to seek out which was lost, those who the world had forgotten about. So may we do the same. So Justin, thank you so much, and we're gonna post this on YouTube, and hopefully it helps somebody. So
I love it. I'm gonna like it. I'm gonna comment on it. I'm encouraged by it already.
cool, man.
Love you, bro. I'll see you soon.
All right, much love.